What does successful look like in today's digital world for companies that are looking at acquisition as their primary?
I want to just call out from an overall business standpoint is profitability is paramount, and kind of everything else that I'm talking about is sort of secondary to profitability.
Kyler Nixon, he helps companies modernize their sales and marketing strategies to unlock profitable growth. And he is hyper-focused on smaller distributors.
The clients that I work with don't struggle with adoption. They struggle with acquisition. Why not take 10% of your marketing budget and invest in whatever that is for your industry that you think is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck from a content and a relationship building standpoint? But I see that a lot because these brands position themselves as the hero. And meanwhile, the potential customer is sitting there saying, I'm really happy for you, but I'm looking for a guide who can help me win my story, not about another hero who's trying to win their own story.
So if you're running a 7 or 8 figure B2B business and you're struggling with things like declining catalog performance, rising ad costs, flatlining revenue, this episode is going to be for you. Our guest, Kyler Nixon, he's a former e-commerce chief revenue officer for a very successful distributor. He's turned consultant, and now he helps companies modernize their sales and marketing strategies to unlock profitable growth. Kyler is new on the scene. He's posting regularly on LinkedIn, and he is hyper-focused on smaller distributors. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. I have an interesting question for you. So I know you're used to building brand and personal brand in other aspects, but this year was the first time you decided to build a personal brand in this B2B commerce space. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
What made you kind of decide to go down that route of the personal brand stuff versus, I know you're going to do consulting and stuff like that, but what made you actually go down the personal brand route?
Well, I got to make money to pay the bills and feed my family. So that made it a little bit easy. But I had a lot of, I don't know if friends is the right word, or former colleagues or people that I had connected with that have had a lot of success kind of building their personal brand. And I think too, as a consultant, and especially trying to position myself as someone who can help you with strategy, right? And like strategy is essentially just how you think and how you kind of apply that to a business setting. I knew that I had to be able to communicate that well, right? If I didn't put myself out online and communicate how I feel about things and my view of how I think businesses should run or not run, again, kind of through that lens of personal brand, I knew I wasn't going to go anywhere, right? I was just going to be spinning my wheels or cold calling businesses trying to earn their business, which, didn't sound appealing to me at all. And I think the other reason is people buy from people, right? I mean, everyone says that. And so the more I can show up online or in these spaces where I am showing who I am and I'm letting you get a glimpse into kind of how I operate and how I think and how I live my life and how I view the world, I knew that was going to be advantageous because it would disqualify customers that are clients that I didn't want to work with, right? And it would qualify clients that kind of view the world through the same lens. So I guess I didn't give it too much more thought other than that. Like it was sort of birthed from necessity. And then now when I'm thinking about it, those are the other things that I think about.
Why LinkedIn as a platform? First of all, is LinkedIn your main, or are you doing other platforms?
Yeah, solely focused on LinkedIn for now. You kind of alluded to this earlier, but I have some experience building brands, both for clients and kind of personally on Instagram. And so I thought about going and hanging out on Instagram, but then realistically, like that's not where my ideal clients were. And then as of the time of this recording, Twitter or X or whatever is a little bit of a hot mess. And I just didn't really want to touch that at this moment. And so I knew LinkedIn is kind of having its moment and kind of having a favorable algorithm for people that want to teach and want to connect with people. And so again, didn't give it too much more thought other than kind of saying, okay, I'm not going to be on Facebook. Instagram doesn't really make sense for this audience. Twitter, I kind of want to stay away from. So LinkedIn just felt like a really natural extension of where I was trying to be.
Our most surprising platform, it's something we don't check on a regular basis, but our most surprising platform is Facebook.
Really?
For videos, especially.
I would never guess
it's super
that.
Interesting. The reels in Facebook are kind of killing it. And
dang.
Yeah, it's interesting. Not a place that I hang out on either.
Yeah. That's surprising. I've had people and clients that have had success with Facebook groups. Like, I think they're kind of waning in their effectiveness. Like 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they were really like, seemed like Facebook groups were crushing it. But I don't think that makes sense to try to start a group as a personal brand, because I don't have anyone to join the group, right? So you kind of have to have some knowledge there. But I haven't. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that Facebook has been so successful.
What's been the short-term effect of building that personal brand?
Well, for right now, the connections for sure. I mean, I've told you this story offline separately, but like when I left my job as a chief revenue officer, and then I went on on my own, and I didn't have any clients. Like, I literally had no safety net, and I had a 3-month-old at home. So I'm like, that's, super smart of me, right? But I went out on my own, and I literally remember, Justin, I was sitting in the nursery holding him, rocking him for a nap, and I get on LinkedIn, and I hadn't even posted anything yet. I don't even think I had updated my bio or anything to let people know I was leaving my job. And I searched B2B e-commerce. Like, that's literally all I searched. Justin King pops up, right away. Subsequently, it was a great kind of first connection to have, is connecting with you. And then just a bunch of other people that, you've already had on the podcast, or that you will have on the podcast, or that are a part of the, B2B EA, that really just like, I jumped in, and all of those people, yourself included, just said, hey, welcome. We've been doing this for a minute. Like, we want your voice here. And so that connection has been great. Like, you and I have connected, but I've had some in-person connections, people that have come to Madison and grabbed lunch with me or whatever, or that have kind of passed along connections behind the scenes. And so that's probably been the most rewarding part of it. Even if I never get clients or never got clients from LinkedIn, like, having that community where you can feel supported and you can connect with people who, have experience that you might not have, or have, ideas or thoughts or guidance that you might not have, I think has been really, really, really valuable for me.
It's such a long game, the payoff on it is enormous.
Yeah.
But it's a long game. Credibility is a long game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I have a buddy who has been pretty successful on LinkedIn, and I've been at it for 6-7 weeks as of the time of this recording, and I was like, dude, like, I'm only getting like 10 likes on my posts, and I'm only getting a couple comments here and there. And he's like, dude, it's not months, it's years. Like, you got to like really like dig in and stay with it, which I should know, right, from my time building brands outside of LinkedIn. But yeah, it's tough. Like, it's tough to like put a lot of heart and effort and like thought into like a post that you want to get out there, and it's kind of met with crickets, right? Nothing. And then, I think what's good is just learning what resonates and what doesn't. That's definitely valuable right now, because I am having some posts that'll get 25, 30 likes and really good comments, and then others that don't do anything. And so just kind of understanding what the algorithm wants and what people are kind of resonating with has been helpful to learn too.
2 or 3 weeks ago, I wrote a great post in my opinion.
Yeah.
It was a great post, and I hand selected the image, curated it, and wrote the post, really kind of planned it out of what I was writing. Hip.
Right.
Did it at the right time.
Yeah.
Morning.
Everything.
Did everything. Great hook.
Yeah.
Post. Nothing. I got very little, right? I actually got good views, but just not, good impressions, just not.
Right.
So that afternoon, I am coming up with this I decided I want to put a page out there for the podcast. And I put a page out there for the podcast. And then I put myself as, hey, I now work for the podcast that I own. Right?
Yeah, right.
100 comments, 175 likes, or whatever. I don't even know what the numbers are. But the numbers are not even in the ballpark.
Yeah.
So on the post where it says, I got a new job, that, by the way, I created
for yourself.
And
you are the employer.
And everybody knows this, right? I had a guy, and it's still going. I got a comment yesterday. Congrats, Justin. It's like,
the moral of the story though is you have to create new shell companies for yourself to work 100%. At every week. Like, if you want to maintain 100%. That engagement, you got to just do that every single week now. So
things. Yeah, it's an interesting long game. And Kyler, more than anything, I get messages all the time, or I get on the phone with someone who said this, I've been reading your stuff for years.
Isn't that crazy?
And I never reached out. I've never commented, never liked. And it's a pleasure to speak with you now. And then here's the opportunity I need to put in front of you. Mm. So it's so little actually about the likes and the comments and stuff like that. It's the message, it's the consistency, it's the transparency, it's the personality that resonates more in this than anything else.
It's fascinating too. Like my wife and I have this little side hustle, and our Instagram account has like 40,000, followers on it. We've built that up over 4 or 5 years, and it's been a nice little project for us. And we'll post something and it'll get, 5,000 likes or something like that. And we have 40,000 followers. So it's like, we've had posts that have gotten hundreds of thousands of likes or, millions of views or whatever. And so you kind of raise the benchmark every time that happens, where you're like, dang, every post needs to get this, because I know we can do it. What's funny is, like, I remember we got a post that had, or a reel that had like 100,000 views or 200,000 views. And I remember my wife was like, man, like, I'm kind of disappointed that did that and, whatever else. And I was like, if you put all 100,000 of those people who watched your content, watched that reel, and you put them in the big house in Michigan, right? University of Michigan's football stadium, that's 100,000 people. That's 100,000 people. Like, that's not a small, it's like, that thing that you had to say, even if you only captured their attention for 3 seconds or 10 seconds, it's like, that's insane when you visualize it in like a real capacity, and even if it's, I had a post that had impressions of like 400 people on LinkedIn and had like 5 likes. It's like, dang, like, I wish that would have done. 500 people is a lot of people. Like, that's a lot of people if you really lined it up. So I'm trying to get outside of, like, there's 5 people that liked it. There's 495 people that saw it or lurked on it, or maybe read it a few times and didn't interact with it, which is fine too, right? Like, we don't actually know that, but I'm trying to keep that in perspective of, like, online, those feel like small numbers, but then in real life, it's like, oh, that's actually a huge number, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard perspective to keep, but
Gary V had a post a couple of days ago and basically said, I have X million followers, and I posted something. I got 25,000 likes. He said, I have a brand new account with 40 followers on it, and I posted something and it got 2 million or whatever it was, views or likes or whatever it was, right? Yeah. And he said the point is that it's the content that matters, not the subscribers and the followers and all of that, right? It's still about that. And frankly, in this business, you need 5 people a year to respond positively.
True.
To create a business that's a very effective business.
Yeah, that's really, really true. Yeah.
You don't
need, just trying to remember that.
You don't need 40, you don't need 50, you don't need 100. 5,
well,
10.
I had someone who, like, and I haven't, I'm kind of getting new. I'm new to this, right? So I haven't gotten clients from LinkedIn. I mean, just being like totally transparent on that. But I had someone who I think I sent a connection request to 2 months ago. They've never liked my stuff. I've never sent them a DM. They've never commented on anything. I haven't seen them visit my profile, like none of that, right? And just this morning, I got a DM and said, hey, love what you've been posting. Can you give me a call? I'd love to talk about something we're working on and maybe bring you in. I'm like, dang, okay, that keeps you going, right?
That's right.
Like, to that point, you only need 4 or 5, 6 of those to have a sustainable business as a consultant, obviously.
That's right. That's right. That's amazing. You've been on LinkedIn. You've been talking a lot about this idea of kind of modern digital brands, modern e-commerce brand. And I like your perspective for a couple reasons. I see part of it's that you're talking to an audience of smaller manufacturers, smaller distributors. That's one. The other part of that, though, that I'd like to talk about here and get your perspective is not just the smaller manufacturer distributor by size, but the ones that can be nimble enough to do really interesting things. And I'm really curious on, like, how you see that playing out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. One distinction that I want to bring in really quick too, aside from potentially size, right? So you just made that, disclaimer, which is good. The clients that I work with and the background that I came from, you will talk a lot about, and you are an expert in adoption of e-com platforms,
Mm.
right? And we've talked about this a few times, but the clients that I work with don't struggle with adoption. Like they have 80+% of their clients buy products from them online. They've potentially been doing it for years. They don't struggle with adoption. They struggle with acquisition, right? They need new clients or
Mm.
new customers to come in because they can't retain you can't retain your way to growth, right? So they can't retain enough and grow their house file enough to really grow the business, and so they have to get new customers. And one of the challenges is that so many of those brands are heavily dependent on catalog, on paid Google ads, on Facebook ads, on what I would call performance marketing, channels, right? And so those things worked really well 10, 15, 20 years ago, where you could drop a catalog in the mail, have a certain percentage of that catalog drop be to prospects, and it would work. Like it would drive new clients to your new customers to the business. And that acquisition problem is no longer a problem, right? Because you're acquiring new customers using these performance marketing channels. The problem is that those have gotten progressively less effective over time, right? As new data laws are introduced, as data becomes more messy from a client standpoint, as people don't respond as well to print or other advertising channels. And then they've also gotten more expensive. So every single year, those brands are spending more money to drive either the same or a worse result. Well, that's like not a great recipe for growth. Like I'm not a super smart guy, but like I know that that's not, a profitable option, right? And so I see so many brands that struggle with that. And instead of saying, well, hold on, let's come up for air for a second. And what are we doing here that worked 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago that is no longer working? And how do we actually like pivot from some of those things so that we can lean into where we need to go? Because the company that was successful in the year 2000 is not going to be successful in the year 2025 if they haven't changed anything about their marketing and advertising strategy. They're just going to bleed to death. Like, I don't know how to say that in a softer, more kind way. Like, it's just how it is. And so, yeah, I think to intersect that back to what we're probably going to spend some time talking about is so many of these brands are really stuck in this performance marketing, endless aisle, sell a bunch of products, kind of nameless, faceless, impersonal brand, and are not really evolving into kind of what's needed to be successful in 2025 and beyond.
So what does that look like? What does, in your mind, what does successful look like in today's digital world for these companies that are looking at acquisition as their primary?
Yeah. Profitability is hugely important, right? So I talk a lot about that. I probably should talk more about it on LinkedIn. And so I think in general, like if you were to call me and say, Kyler, like we're getting highly profitable ROI on our catalog, we're getting highly profitable return on Google ads, and the business is growing, okay, I would consider what you're going to do next, but like I'm not really talking to you if you're growing profitably, right? There's probably something else that you're doing that's effective. And so I think profitability is always the North Star for these brands because it's just the lifeblood, right? Like you can't grow, you can't hire, you can't invest, you can't modify the business, you can't weather any storms if you're not profitable. And so I think that's like the first thing that I want to just call out from an overall business standpoint is profitability is paramount, and kind of everything else that I'm talking about is sort of secondary to profitability, right? And so if you're saying, okay, I'm a distributor, I'm doing $50-100 million a year, the business has been down 5%, 10%, kind of month over month or year over year over the last few years, and I don't know what to do. The first area that I think I would recommend looking is where is your biggest marketing spend, right? And typically for these brands, it's either in catalog or it's in some type of bottom of funnel paid ad program. So Google search.
When you say catalog, do you mean digital
physical
catalog,
print,
physical catalog?
Yeah, thanks for that distinction. Physical print catalog. That's, if you're the Grangers of the world, it's as thick as this book that I'm, holding up right now. And if you're smaller, it's probably smaller, but a physical catalog that you mail to people and direct response marketing, right? Like kind of the classic view of traditional print marketing and traditionally sending a physical catalog in the mail. So yeah, that's the distinction that I'm making.
How effective is is direct marketing like that? Direct response.
Not effective.
Not effective.
Not effective. And I don't have I probably could come in with numbers, but I mean, like for us, without disclosing like kind of company information and like trade secrets and stuff, like it helped with retention, and it potentially helped with winning back lapsed customers from 2-3 years ago, right? Like, and that's fine. Like we spent X dollars to go get those customers back and to retain those customers. The problem is if that's a bulk of your marketing spend, you're spending most of your money and most of your marketing dollars to just retain your existing customers, which it's not effective, right? You have to spend that money to go acquire new customers, and there has to be an investment in retention. I'm not saying that, but you have to be able to invest in getting new customers. And I'm not anti-print, and I know that's going to sound weird considering what I just said, which is that it's not effective. I think the blind drop where we send, a bunch of catalogs, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of catalogs, at this time and this time and this time, and that's it. Like we don't consider segmenting, we don't consider when customers buy, we don't consider triggers, we don't consider account-based sending. Like it's literally just 3 times a year we mail a catalog and hope it works. That is wildly ineffective to me.
It's a good job to have that if you're in marketing and that's all you do.
It's intense though. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about how we built those catalogs. Like that's a ton of time, but it's like, no job security either, I guess, coming down the pipe.
So there's a phrase I use with the big distributors, and I want your perspective from the other side of it. There's a phrase I use with the big distributors when I'm speaking, and it's kind of people remember. I say the company that kills you will look nothing like you. Meaning everything that you've done to be an effective distributor today, it makes you bad at innovation, and the company, the new start company will just use different techniques all across the board.
Totally.
Saying that you're a $75 million distributor that you own, like how do you go to market?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that phrase is spot on. It might be a different application for the big boys, but it's the same. The concept is the same for these smaller companies, which is if you're a $75 million distributor, right? We'll get into that example. The small company that just, was founded within the last 10 years, they're not doing most of the things that you're doing. They're not chasing historicals, right? So they're willing to cut products that aren't profitable for them. They aren't mailing a catalog because they didn't even think about it because they were founded 10 years ago, right? Most of their marketing is not in performance marketing and bottom of funnel ads. It's in content. It's in brand building. It's in product development. It's in great user experience and user interface on their website. Like that's who you're going up against, right? And that brand might not be 75 million yet. And you might look at them and be like, that's so cute. That little $10 million brand is so cute. They're going to kill you. They're going to crush you because you are so stuck to your performance marketing model and unwilling to cut unprofitable SKUs and unwilling to kind of modernize your workforce and unwilling to think about how to integrate things like AI, which I know you're big on. Like if you're unwilling to do that small company's coming. It's just a matter of time, right? And so I think that phrase is definitely spot on. So ask your question again, and then I can get into
so you own the $75 million distributor, and you're taking them. You can basically start from zero from the $75 million distributor. What do you do to go to market? What's your go to market plan with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's say that you are needing to evolve. So even if we're starting from scratch, you still have a house file of customers that are buying from you, right?
Yeah.
And so I typically, I have a matrix on my Instagram or on my LinkedIn that I talk about this a lot, but there's kind of 2 main evolutions that brands like that need to make. One of 2 is fine. And then there's kind of a third after you go through those steps, but you can't go to point B before you go through point A. So there's 2 directions you can go. One is you can start to ditch performance marketing and move into what I call attention-based marketing. So in that world, the go-to-market strategy still might have some ads. You still need to do that. I'm not saying just like completely blow up performance marketing, but the brands that are crushing it are doing things like podcasting. They're doing things like community groups. They're publishing CEO or founder-led content. They are putting out educational resources and courses. They are hosting events and conferences, right? They're capturing attention by being kind of integral to the person's everyday life. On the B2B SaaS side, HubSpot is a great example of that, right? Like just study what HubSpot has done over the last 5 to 10 years. They're everywhere. They have a podcast network. They have helpful long form content. They have educational resources. Like that same thing applies to a B2B e-com brand. Like those principles are, timeless, and they can do whatever you need them to do. So that's evolution one, is kind of keep your existing focus of who you're trying to serve and really just try to go higher up the funnel and try to build attention with them.
Before you move on to the second, I think the one problem with that, Kyler, is that it's such a long game. It's what we were talking about with the personal brand, right?
Sure.
That stuff takes time to develop. It takes consistency. It takes consistency when it's not working and still being. If I would have kept doing my podcast that I started in 2017, it would be huge right now. It would be the biggest thing. I quit.
Yeah.
Right. I quit the podcast. I got too busy, wasn't getting responses. I don't even remember them. I don't even remember what the reasons were.
Yeah.
But I quit because it's hard, and doing things when there's no one watching is hard. And being consistent when no one's watching is hard to do. So I eventually quit.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same argument applies to a modern day distributor.
Sure.
That stuff, the payoff is down the road instead of today. How do you work through that with an executive team in that distribution company? Well,
for starters, are you enjoying a slow bleed anyway? Because your business is likely declining year over year in revenue. So do you want to just keep doing that? Because that's going to, in 5 years, you're going to be worse off anyway. So you might as well start putting out content and trying to build relationships and attention now. Second, a little bit softer and more gentler of me, and probably what I would say is, okay, let's build that out over time, right? Like you can reduce dependence on catalog or get smarter about how you mail people. You can get smarter about performance-based marketing, which frees up some dollars, right? And start to, over time, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, like build out what that is. But what I see so many brands doing is they say, well, it's going to take time. And then they don't do anything. And so they just sit there and they try to do the same thing, and they just try to be better. Like they just try to out better their competition, which doesn't work. Right. And so, I'll acknowledge this is not necessarily, and I'm saying necessarily because I want to come back to that in a second. This isn't necessarily a quick fix, but nothing in your business is and if it was, everyone would be doing it and you'd be crushing it right now anyway. So either way, you're likely going to end up 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line with the same problem. So you might as well start today trying to figure out how to build relationships.
The analogy is that if I wouldn't have quit, I wouldn't have had to start now in this podcast, right? If I wouldn't have quit my podcast back then, I just would have continued.
Right.
I wouldn't be starting over. I still had to do it. Doing the podcast was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And instead, I just started it 5 years later instead of now having 5 years of content, growing and learning and all of that. And it's, I think you're saying kind of the same thing for the distributor. You're going to have to do this stuff anyways. It's just a matter if you start today or start tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and from a practical standpoint, why not take 10% of your marketing budget, cut where you think there's probably fat, which shouldn't be hard to find. Take 10% of your marketing budget and invest in whatever that is for your industry that you think is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck from a content and a relationship building standpoint, right? Maybe it's video, maybe it's, podcast, maybe it's buying a community group, fill in the blank, right? Just take a portion of it and just see what happens. And then over time, that's going to compound. If you would have kept at that podcast, the reason you're saying it'd be huge is because it compounds over time, right? Not just because time is a great, it's going to compound over time. So I think that's what people miss, and they get so tunnel vision on what's happening right now, day to day. And gosh dang, we got to hit this number this month or this number next month. And content and attention-based marketing span quarters and years, not necessarily, days, weeks, and months. But the other thing that I would add is there's a company that I love. I found them a year ago. It's a company called Farmer's Friend, and very niche B2B, supplier of small farms, commercial farms, right? As far as I can tell, they started in the last 10 to 15 years. They don't send a catalog, and they've invested heavily in video content. And if you go look at their YouTube account, they have YouTube videos, by the way, that are gorgeous. Like, let me just say, like, beautifully done, high quality, that tell the story of their customers that have gotten millions of views. So yeah, I guess technically it's not going to happen overnight, but for them, they have found a way in a short period of time to drive traffic and drive eyeballs and build the brand, through some of this type of marketing tactics.
I would imagine that when there's no one in that space doing it and talking about it, it's easier to get traction in that as well. Probably.
I think the other thing that B2B brands don't realize that they have an advantage on is the person you're especially these smaller brands, right? I'm not talking about the multi-billion-dollar companies of the world. And I could make an argument that this stuff would work for them too, but I'm not really talking to them or about them, and I don't have any experience with those brands. But these smaller brands that are serving maybe a slightly more niche vertical, or they're serving a slightly more niche product focus, when they're selling to a business, the business on the other side has things that they need beyond just, oh, that's a cool sweatshirt, right? Or, oh, those are cool shoes, right? They have real business needs. So can you come in and say, like, I don't know why this example always comes front of mind for me, but there's a company that I'd love to work with that sells pet grooming supplies. Okay. So they sell to groomers and to, like the PetSmarts of the world, right? B2B, pretty niche, pretty small focus. What I'd love to see a company like that do is put out a, dog grooming certification course, right? Or put out Dog Grooming Weekly, and it's a podcast or a newsletter that talks about things happening in the industry and how to get better at your job and how to charge more to your clients. That actually solves a real problem for their business buyer on the other end of it, more than just, how do I make this a nice transactional relationship where they come to me when they need me? And I think these smaller brands, especially that have a focus, like the company I was at sold to landscapers, greenhouses, nurseries, right? So how do you help that landscaper make 10, 20% more money this year? And by the way, use our tools to do it, right? That's kind of how I think these brands need to be thinking about it.
Well, I think that also addresses how do I help my customer do their job easier?
Yes.
You can approach that from a product perspective. You can also approach it from like the things we're going to offer them. I was thinking about, as you said, that idea of certification. There were two guys that were in the diving community, scuba diving community.
Okay.
And they wanted to sell more scuba diving equipment to scuba diving instructors. Mm-hmm. And how they did that was they started the first ever scuba diving certification.
Yeah.
Like the instructor certification.
Yeah. But so you know why that works, right? Like you get why that works. Because it's not just like people are going to listen to this, Justin, and they're going to say, oh, okay, that's great. Like they were the first ones out there, they whatever else. Like, but they're missing why it actually works and why it actually helps build the business. It actually has nothing to do with the education. Like that certification could have been terrible. It could have sucked. Like it honestly could have. I probably didn't, but it could have sucked. The reason that it works is because for however long that certification is, that potential customer is spending that amount of time with your brand.
Yeah.
So when they need scuba equipment for that next class or that next excursion or whatever it is, who are they going to go buy from? They're going to buy from the company that they just spent 4, 5, 10, 20 hours with, not the company that they just Googled and ran across their site. Like that's why it works, is because you've captured their attention and you've built a relationship with them that is beyond just the products. So sorry, it gets me fired up. But that's why it works.
That's a beautiful, beautiful description of that. I mean, that's why we did our certification, right? I felt like it was a need. It also served something in the customer too, Kyler, of their psyche of, hey, I'm certified.
Yeah.
I'm not like
totally
the other guy that's uncertified.
Yeah, that loser.
I'm better because I'm certified.
Right.
And I can wear it as a badge.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll help my career, and maybe I'll make more money.
Yes.
I think often we forget about all of the intangible things that are actually driving people. Like,
yes,
people are not in a job because 100%. They just want to be in a job. Like the way to appeal someone is like, You will be seen as better at your job, which means you're going to make more money in your job and get that new promotion. Like that's the real underlying reason people are doing these things often, right? And if you can serve that in some way, serve that idea in people's heads some way and inch them closer just a little bit to that, or them believe that, that's really serving your customer.
Why do you feel like B2B ecom brands struggle with that? Because I see that in almost every other vertical, like whether it's B2B SaaS, whether it's D2C, whether it's like the education and course space, whether it's the service industry. Like why do you feel like B2B is still so transactional?
I think it's so old school of often it is company to company things that are happening, which is so transactional and terms and conditions instead of people realizing there's a person behind that. And I don't mean a person behind there in the consumerization of B2B type way where we say they need B2C, they need the same type of B2C experience, whatever. I'm saying there's a person behind there. That person actually has goals and objectives in their job. Your job is to figure out what they are and then serve them or figure out a way to tie into it. And I think most people forget about the people behind it.
Are you familiar with the story brand framework?
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Explain
the story brand framework.
Sure. So basic concept is that customers are the hero in their own story, right? And so as humans, we wake up every day and we say, I'm the hero in the story and I'm looking for a guide to help me be successful, right? And every major movie in Hollywood follows, 7 kind of main steps. There's a character who has a problem. They meet a guide who gives them a plan, calls them to action, which results in success or failure, right? Every movie follows that same pattern. And so the problem that I see is so many brands, and not just to be clear, this is not like a B2B ecom problem. Like this happens everywhere. That's why the book Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller is a New York Times bestseller like 10 times over. But I see that a lot because these brands position themselves as the hero, say we were founded in this year and here's why we're so great and this why this product is so awesome and this why our website has all these bells and whistles and these are all the features and this is why you should care about us. And meanwhile, the customer or potential customer is sitting there saying, okay, that's great. I'm really happy for you. I want to catch up with you at some point, but I'm looking for a guide who can help me win my story, not about another hero who's trying to win their own story, right? And so I think when brands position that to say what you just said and what we spent the last 5 minutes talking about, how can I help you become a better version of yourself? How can I help you succeed at your job? And even if you're just a buyer, or even if you're an admin in an office placing an order somewhere, how can I make that so that it's easier for you? How can I make you be successful today and have a positive outcome? Because I want to play the guide when you're the hero. And I think so many businesses, flip that and don't understand that transformation that has to happen.
But I think that's pretty amazing actually to say. I think too that we value brand names on our websites versus the people.
Oof.
And like when we walk around at conferences, people look like they don't even see your name. They're skipping over your name and looking at the company you work for. Because they see you as some like access point to the budget that that you hold inside the company.
Yeah. Find the decision.
That's a dangerous spot. And so
that's so interesting.
One of the reasons that we've built the B2BA, and I think it's actually it should translate directly for everyone listening to this, is we started to realize, what if we care about the individual? Like, what does the individual want?
Yeah, so good.
What if we didn't care about what company this VP of e-commerce worked for? What if we just asked them, hey, what are your personal goals? Where are you going with your career?
Yeah, that's good.
And I think the similar thing can actually be done in distribution in a more limited way, right? Or more less strategic way. But you can certainly build a podcast or build YouTube videos that somehow touch on the emotions of that person. And I never really thought about that, Kyler, until you just said that.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. We, in some industries, it's a little bit easier to do that than others. Like I said, we sold landscaping tools and supplies, basically. So shovels, safety gear, gloves, like
Yeah.
pruners, like that type of stuff. And it's really easy to look at something like that and say, well, that's just a shovel, right? Or that's just a pruner, right? And I did this a lot, but I made our marketing team go through this exercise of, okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so what does that mean? Until eventually you get to the point where you realize that pruner that we just sold today is going to help someone, have a really great Thanksgiving with their family because the fruit that the company they bought it from that used the prune, like you go through that whole like progression and you realize there's real people and there's real business use cases and real life things that are happening on the tail end of that. Like I'll just using even the dog grooming example, right? You're not just selling, a clipper, hair clippers or something like that. You're selling something that helps someone build a career, that helps them serve their community, that helps them impact like people around them. Like that's a real tangible story. And it's really easy to get wrapped up in, well, I just sell this or we just sell that. Go through the progress, like who's actually using it? Like who is the customer on the actual end of this journey? And how can you speak to their success and speak to why that product actually matters? D2C does that well, just to be clear. Like most D2C brands have figured that out. And partly because most of them shill just like crap, right? Like I don't need another one of these things. So you have to figure out how to, the features don't matter. You got to sell the emotional component. But in B2B, like the features do matter. And I still need to sell emotional component because at the end of the day, it's people selling to people, right? With real needs and real emotions and real desires.
But if we played this idea out, so if you're a landscaping distribution company and you have landscapers and you start talking to landscapers and you start talking about like their business of landscaping, right? They're probably going to bring up a couple issues. One might be, I have hard time keeping people, right?
Yep.
Good people. I need more leads, right? Or I have a hard time managing my finances and operations. If you heard those problems, there are probably things you could do. You could build a podcast about managing landscaping businesses better, right?
Yeah.
You could, so taking your
100%.
ideas like that and translating it. When you first said podcast, my mind went to a podcast about my products that I sell.
No. Yeah. Thanks for making that distinction. Because that's not what I mean. And I don't think if you're going to do that for your like, just don't do that. Like that's a terrible podcast. Like sitting and talking about all the features of a shovel or all the features of a fill in the blank of your product. Like nobody cares. It's what you just rattled off better and articulated better than I did, which is again, using the landscaper example. I'm in a group on Facebook called Launchpreneurs. It's like a bunch of solo and small company landscapers. Like it's kind of a fascinating group. Most of them mow lawns. Well, every day there's dozens of posts in that group. How much should I charge for this? How are you guys handling taxes? My employees keep quitting. Like, I kind of wish that I would have found that group sooner and we would have launched a podcast because I would have just sat there for 5 minutes every day and just wrote down what all these guys are asking for. And then I would go turn it into a podcast. But that's what I mean. And like ignore podcasts for a second if you want to, because you don't have to do that. You could do that for blogs. You could do that for a newsletter. You could do that for a community group. Like all of those mediums are just sort of like, it's a medium. It's just a way to get that message out there. But instead what I see is all of these brands just continue to send transactional emails. They continue to put videos out that are, check out the features of this new product we're carrying. And nobody cares. Like they don't care about that. And they're getting blasted with those messages hundreds of times a day anyway. And so why don't you just go upstream and say, hey, look, we know you're solving this problem. You're having this problem with how to be more profitable, or you want to make more money as a landscaper. We're going to help you solve that problem. And by the way, when you're ready, we have these products that will help you and that we really truly believe in. But the core is to solve a felt need for them, build a relationship. And then when it's time to move the product into focus, it's time to move the product into focus. But most brands, flip that or don't do it at all.
Do you have any examples of distributors, manufacturers that are doing well? You talked about the farm. What was it called? Farm?
Yeah, Farmer's Friend.
Farmer's Friend. Do you have other?
They do great work.
Other people that you think are doing
this
right?
I'll rattle off a couple. And again, this is a little bit defined to like kind of the scope that I'm used to. So I'll try to try to branch out as
Yeah.
much as I can. But Beacon Athletics is another really good example. So they're based here in Madison, Wisconsin. They sell like supplies for baseball and softball fields. So all the like netting and the like the bases and the pitcher's mound and like the tools and the rakes and the hoses and the netting and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's for baseball and softball facilities, all the way from MLB down to, you know, your youth sports league that, you know, has 10 fields, you know, near you. And they launched something a while ago. Actually, they're kind of, I think, one of the OGs in the space. They launched something called Groundskeeper U, and they train groundskeepers on how to, you know, do this. And it's like 7 or 8 parts, and it's video based. It's very easy to go through. There's a certification at the end. By the way, they're using their products as a part of telling them how to maintain grounds, right? Which is smart. And so I think that's one example of a brand that's doing it really well. For us, the company that I was at, we built out something called a learning hub. And so we broke out our blog out of our Shopify site, and we just put out educational content. There was everything from more product heavy, like a buyer's guide, where we tried to really remain impartial. And as a distributor, you can do that because you're carrying, you know, likely carrying multiple
brands,
you know, products. And so we did buyer's guides for products, but then we also did how-tos. We did information. We did safety buyer's guides where, you know, you can print something out, or not buyer's guides, safety training sheets where you could print it out and just go through it and say, okay, guys, today we're going to talk about how to keep your hands safe on the job. We're working here and we're doing this. And we went through it, you know, safety training sheets and had those. So those are a few examples of kind of things that I think work well, and that drove traffic for us, but it also was good email content. It was good, you know, relationship building content too.
That's amazing. Who are you following on LinkedIn that you find pretty fascinating to watch? Anybody different, newcomers?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. So my mind immediately goes to Lindsay Young. She has, I think her byline, I could look it up quick, but I think her byline on LinkedIn is helping distributors tell their stories or something along those lines. That's fascinating because that's what I'm talking about, right? She might go about it slightly differently, but I think her approach and her team of like how they draw that story out, right, which we talked about 10 minutes ago, of how can we actually help you with a transformation and help you do a better job, and why do we exist, right? Beyond just selling more product. I think her content is pretty fascinating. Trying to think if there's anything else. I'm just going to pull up my messages. A few of them you've already referenced, so like I'm not going to I won't double shout out, but let's see who else I have here. Oh, Cara Babb is another one too that I don't know if you've had her on the show yet, but she's kind of really popped up. I think she was ex-Amazon, and she posts really interesting content, kind of B2B and B2C, like kind of that world. Yeah. Sarah Falcon just connected us actually not too long ago, so I appreciate the hookup there. But yeah, there's just like some of the folks that are talking about how to put out really good content. Like that's where I tend to gravitate towards, just because like how to set up a PIM and how to do your ERP integration and how to, you know, drive product data. Like that's kind of makes my brain hurt. So
how do you consume information and content? Are you a podcast, YouTube, Facebook Reels guy? Like, where do you sit?
Oh, it's a good question. I do enjoy podcasts. I struggle with, like, I have to be, especially for educational content and not just like, you know, things that are fun and entertainment. I have to be like, I have to sit down and like process it, you know? So I'll listen to fun stuff when I'm in the car working out. And then I like, you know, otherwise I'll listen to an actual podcast where I can take notes, you know, stuff like this show. Definitely YouTube. And then I do like the quick form written content, which is maybe a little bit weird. So I do enjoy LinkedIn, like just scrolling on LinkedIn and reading what people post. I spend an unhealthy amount of time on TikTok, but that's purely for entertainment. I think my feed is not very refined. So yeah, that's probably it.
Is there a podcast, a YouTube channel, an appropriate TikTok that you like just about, it could be about business?
Yes. Oh, that's a great question. You know what I love? I've listened to this for years, and I went away from it for probably a year, and then I just got back into it a couple months ago, is How I Built This. With Guy Raz. Like, oh man, like it's such a popular podcast, but he's at the point now where he's kind of interviewed like the most massive brands out there that you could want to hear from. And so I like it now because like it's a little more niche, smaller companies and how they kind of had to weave their way through, which I'm drawn to. So that's definitely one of my
Did you listen to his about the founder of Rivian?
No, I haven't yet.
It's been in the last week. I actually didn't listen to that, how I
I'll
built
definitely want to
this,
listen to
but
that.
he was on Rich Roll after that, and they referenced his how I built this
Okay. I haven't
episode.
listened to it. I'll go listen to it. I have like a backlog of like 100 episodes because I didn't listen for like a year and then I got back into it. So
The question is, how do you build an electric car company with no money
yeah,
from scratch? Like,
yeah,
I can't think of anything more
dude.
complex than building a car company from scratch with no money.
Have you heard of 27 North?
Yes, I don't know from
It's
where.
they manufacture, like, I think they don't build from scratch. Like Rivian builds their cars from scratch, right? Where like 27 North will outfit stuff and like build like
Oh,
luxury
okay.
like expedition vehicles and RV maybe isn't the right word, but you know, like camper vans and like sprinters and stuff like that. And I'm probably not explaining that very well. If there anyone on their team heard me saying that, they'd probably be like, "You're like totally butchering it." But their founder, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I follow him and he has a really fascinating kind of like just behind the scenes, like how we do this and how we do things with excellence. And you know, it's like it's not EV, but it's like, you know, vehicle manufacturing, which is like a
Yeah.
wild kind of market. There's another guy too on LinkedIn because I try to also get outside of the B2B space because at some
Yes.
point it's a little bit of an echo chamber, like where people are just reiterating the same concepts. Okay, so there's a guy on LinkedIn, Colin Strachan, I think Strachan. I'm not sure exactly how to say it. He is building a production company in Alaska, like film
Oh, that's sweet.
production. Like they helicopter places, they like, you know, skipper planes, like, and he's worked with some, you know, major brands that you would know, right? But they like make these like incredibly cinematic, like beautiful, you know, Alaskan wilderness type videos, and his content is just like top notch. So I like to consume like creative like stuff outside of the space to
Yeah.
just try to see how it applies.
So two more questions. One is my favorite that I started it in the first episode, and then I'm in for asking this question every time,
Okay.
which is, do you see any business opportunities, like software to be built, big, small opportunities, obviously ones that you don't want to go actually do yourself right now, that you think are interesting startup ideas?
It's really interesting. You signed my NDA, right? Just kidding. The easy answer is going to be an AI right now, I think. And so there's some brands that are doing some really cool stuff, like specifically in the B2B space, like AI merchandising, AI search, like all that stuff, I think is definitely the way forward. I think that some of the AI content production stuff, like I'm not a big like come up with a brand new idea from scratch, so I'm struggling a little bit with
Yeah,
how to come
that's
up with
fine.
that. But some of those, like, how do we
It's some
repurpose, you
people's
know,
things.
yeah.
It's some people's thing. It's other people won't. It's fine.
Yeah.
How do you want people to get a hold of you, Kyler?
Yeah. So we can definitely connect on LinkedIn. So Kyler, Kyler, like Tyler with a K. I think my parents just went down the alphabet and they're like, let's just, you know, do that
Let's
apparently.
pick all the K's.
Yeah, we'll just pick all the letters there. And then Kyler Nixon on LinkedIn. And then my website is kylernixon.com and you can schedule a discovery call with me there. So either of those places
and
is great.
we'll link both of those in the show notes as well. Sweet. I think this is the first of many conversations. We got one bullet point into the bullets that we wanted to discuss.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And so we've got another 10 left.
Yes.
So let's do this again. I love this idea, great, Kyler, of how as a smaller company, it doesn't have to be a small company. How as a smaller company can you be nimble enough to really take on the big companies and grow? I love what you said. You can't retain yourself into growth. And I love that statement. And so I want to do this many more times.
I appreciate it. I want to say one quick disclaimer too, which is like, I'm kind of being a little bit tongue in cheek with some of what I'm saying, but I know this stuff is hard. Like I was in-house, like I was a chief revenue officer, like I led a marketing and sales team. Like it's easy for us to sit here for an hour and talk on a podcast and sort of like, okay, have a great day. Right. But I do know that this is hard. So if you're listening to this, like, I know that it's tough. Like I know that this is not easy, but I can also tell you that it's worth it. And I can tell you that, you know, yourself 12 months, 24 months, 36 months from now will thank you.
You know, that's true. And the reason we do this podcast and the YouTube and the social and the video is to say, don't do what I say. Like watch what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to model this idea out for everyone, right? The thinking, we're trying to be transparent about it and tell just people like where we're thinking and where we make mistakes and where we think we're going to fail and where we need to buckle down on things. And so it's not as much a cost issue as it is as a dedication issue to make it happen. So it's possible for everyone.
Totally.
For sure.